Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be back with the Phelan-McDermid Syndrome podcast, sharing research, progress, and hope. This is my first recording after my maternity leave, and we are so lucky to have our 2025 grant awardee of the Shannon O'Boyle Memorial Neuropsychiatric Illness Grant, Dr. Jonathan Santoro. Dr. Santoro is a pediatric neurologist at the Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and today he's going to be talking about his grant titled Diagnostic Biomarkers in Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Associated Neuropsychiatric Disease. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and welcome back from maternity leave.
Thank you. So you are new to our Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation community. So could you share with us a little bit more about your background and how you found your way into Phelan-McDermid Syndrome research?
Certainly. So my background is that I'm a pediatric neuroimmunologist. There's only a few of us out in the community, and my research focus has been neurodevelopmental regression, mostly focused on people who have Down syndrome. So that's been our primary model for several years. But even though I've not been formally a part of the Phelan-McDermid community, I was actually at Stanford when a few of these patients were being first treated with immunotherapy, and it actually was one of the reasons that kind of piqued my interest into developmental regression in the first place. And I think that for us, the more that we've looked at Down syndrome and Down syndrome regression disorder, the more similarities we see with Phelan-McDermid syndrome and a variety of other monogenetic causes of developmental regression. And so for me, it was a no-brainer to say, if we can apply what we've learned in Down syndrome to Phelan-McDermid, maybe we can all walk out with, one, an increased understanding of what is happening, but two, this is the most important thing for me, is therapeutics to actually treat it and potentially reverse the neuropsychiatric disease that we see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, knowing you or knowing your body of work from Down syndrome regression disorder, I was very excited when we did see your name in our applications, really hoping that that expertise and knowledge, especially in the therapeutics, can hopefully cross over to our families. So congratulations again on receiving the Shannon O'Boyle Memorial Neuropsychiatric Illness Grant. Can you briefly share what your project aims to accomplish?
Certainly. So as part of the workup for developmental regression, we're often as neurologists ordering EEGs, MRIs, and lumbar punctures. And so what this grant actually proposes is to take all of the tests that we would be doing anyway and now use advanced biological testing to actually see if there are potentially antibodies, if there's evidence of inflammation, and then really within all of that, is there something that we can target? Now, I think that the unique thing is that in individuals who have, mutations or, differences in SHANK3 gene, that can result in a variety of different downstream outcomes. And I think that while I'm hopeful that we're going to find a singular cause, it may be that we actually find that this particular pattern are more resulting in patients who do respond to therapy. And this is the group that actually may respond better to benzodiazepines or other medications. We see a little bit of that in Down syndrome regression disorder, but we really need better, biomarkers to say that this is or is not an immune-based regression, because that's just going to give us a whole host of tools that we can use to treat it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, we've been running our neuropsychiatric consultation group for quite a while now and have helped providers with over 100 patients. And I think the biggest thing we keep hearing is, how are we going to predict? How am I going to know if my child might develop neuropsychiatric illness? Are you thinking that some of your work kind of could pave the pathway to that as well?
Absolutely. So, we can't just run around getting lumbar punctures on everybody, right? Or putting everybody in an MRI scanner. As great as that would be, it's not practical. So our hope is that in some of the blood-based biomarkers, that if we see a certain signature in patients or lack thereof in individuals with Phelan-McDermid without neuropsychiatric disease, that may be actually a helpful process to help us differentiate. Very similar to when we order blood work for somebody who has a thyroid problem, right? We don't know that the thyroid problem is there until we actually test for it. The hope is that if we have blood-based biomarkers, you could check once a year and say, actually, you are at increased risk, and maybe we want to get this workup done a little bit earlier.
Absolutely. And as you're kind of thinking about this and you've seen potentially some more of our Phelan-McDermid syndrome patients, do you think there's going to be certain findings that are going to be more specific to our population and the SHANK3 deletion or variant compared to Down syndrome regression disorder? Do you think they're going to be more overlap? Where do you What's kind of your current thinking on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, inevitably, it's a little bit of apples and oranges, right? So, trisomy of chromosome 21 is very, very different than Chang3. And what's really fascinating to me is that Chang3 is not an immune gene, right? Chromosome 21 has a variety of different, immune genes that are encoded on it, but obviously, it's a much bigger problem than isolated Chang3. So, I don't know if we're going to find similar biomarkers, right? So, for instance, MRIs in Down syndrome regression just sort of seem very specific to interferon dysregulation, which is what we know about their immune system to begin with. So, Chang3 and Phelan-McDermid, I think it's going to be a lot more exploratory, which is good and bad. I mean, we're going to take a very broad approach. We're going to try to do novel antibody discovery, cytokines, all of that sort of stuff, because we really do have to uncover all the rocks still in Phelan-McDermid. Whereas I think with Down syndrome, we had a higher suspicion that this particular pathway was going to be more, more of an explanation, so to speak.
Thinking about our community, I know you and I have briefly mentioned Dr. Milena Anselm at Boston Children's Hospital, who is also doing some work here. How do you see this collaboration evolving and maybe you guys working together to really help our families?
Yeah, well, I think that this is a great example of, two people who have each other's cell phone and communicate and, are on the same page with what we're actually trying to investigate. So it's very complementary. My research is very clinical, very translational, and Milena's is very basic science and things that, I'm not even allowed in my own lab because I'll knock over a beaker and everything will explode. So being able to actually partner with somebody who has such a profound knowledge of basic science, techniques, methodology, and then partnering with us, who we can get samples easy, we can provide CSF, blood, imaging data. Now, I think that this collaboration is actually going to be really fruitful for the Phelan-McDermid community.
I agree, and it's really nice to hear that often researchers, clinicians are sharing each other's cell phone numbers, so there can be more of that easier back and forth, and ultimately, it's helping our families.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is really what science should be, right?
Yeah.
It's a partnership between scientists, between clinicians, between advocacy groups, and the hope is eventually industry, right? We want access to medications that are going to make our patients feel better or recover faster. So that's the hope, is that we kind of all merge together with the shared mission of helping people with Phelan-McDermid syndrome.
Exactly. Truly couldn't have said that better myself. So that leads me into my next question. We've heard from a lot of our other past PMSF grant awardees about the importance of obtaining community feedback, stakeholder feedback, hearing from patients and their families as well. And so, how have you kind of used that stakeholder feedback to inform your project?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes all the way back to the first few patients I ever saw with Phelan-McDermid syndrome. Is those families would not take no for an answer, right?
Hmm.
And this is what makes this community so great, is that it wasn't acceptable to say we don't have the information, we don't know what the cause of the neuropsychiatric regression is. And I think that that's the best part of this community, is that they need to push us as clinicians, as researchers, to say, like, all right, actually we do need to be focusing more on this condition, or what neuropsychiatric disease origins are for this. So I think that that's been, probably the most influential on, the development of certainly this project and others. But, we're constantly asking for feedback, not just from our Phelan-McDermid patients, but from really anyone engaged in research. We run clinical trials right now in Down syndrome regression disorder, and we got a lot of feedback about how do we consent in patients with neuropsychiatric disease that can't consent or assent. And so, through getting feedback from caregivers and some of our patients that had recovered, we found that, including pictures in the consent and assent forms was really instrumental for getting sort of our patients that could understand that to get to the point where they felt comfortable with trials. So we're always looking for ways to do that. And I think that this is our first, dedicated research into Phelan-McDermid. So we're going to be asking quite a bit along the way. What works, what didn't work, but we are constantly looking for frictionless research. We want to make it easy for people to participate, because we know the effort that it takes to get your child up to a medical center, go through all of the testing that we're requesting, and we want to make that as easy as possible.
I really appreciate you saying that. And, in some of our back and forth that we had to let families know, you are talking about doing MRIs, lumbar punctures, things that are not necessarily easy for our families and of their loved ones to do. But you importantly pointed out this is part of your standard clinical care.
Hmm.
And you're not doing anything that's asking above and beyond. And so I think that's also really important for our families to know that these are tests that you're running for clinical care. These are already going to be kind of informing your clinical decision making. And so I think that's an important reminder.
Definitely.
So the project is gearing up to start early 2026. Tell our families kind of what they need to know for recruitment.
Yeah, so we have all of our study based over at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. So I think that that's the only bummer is that it's only at our site for right now. Los Angeles is a beautiful place to travel to. So if you are in a winter and cold climate, just let us know. You can reach out to us at dsresearch, research at chla.usc.edu if you have any questions or you're interested. But we try to get everything organized over a day or two. So it's not a tremendous amount of time. We build in a lot of breaks because it can be a long day for folks as well. So we have snacks, we have, things to keep people entertained. But really, you'll come in, you'll get a blood work, EEG, MRI, and then a lumbar puncture under sedation. And for right now, this is only for families who have had a loved one that has experienced developmental regression. Ideally, you have not had the workup done, but it is not an exclusion for individuals who have not who've already had some of it done or all of it done in the past. Because we spend so much time looking at molecular biomarkers that are novel that don't get tested on a clinical standard of care. So there's plenty of opportunity for folks, and this is something that we do all the time. So our sedation teams know our complex patient populations. We do blood work in the room with families instead of going down to phlebotomy. We find that it's very stressful. So our research nurse comes in and does it right at the bedside, which is always makes things a lot easier. And it tends to be a fun day, and we try to make it as easy as possible. So if you do have any interest, we'd love to have you out to Los Angeles.
Absolutely. We will make sure we include all of that information in our show notes, and there will also be information on our open recruitment page. We are so excited that you, in general, are joining us in our community, but you specifically are going to be at our 2026 PMS Family Conference in Aurora, Colorado. What can families expect to see from you there? Are you going to have some research findings you can already show? Or are you going to be recruiting? What is it going to look like?
Yeah, we'll have some. We already have patients who are signing up. Even though we haven't launched the actual study quite yet. So I'm hopeful we'll have some early preliminary data. It probably won't be anything striking, and certainly the really advanced multi-omics testing that we're going to be running will take some time because we have to batch everything together. What I'm really hoping for is just to meet families, get feedback, and then kind of talk about what we're seeing clinically, in addition to what we're seeing from a research standpoint. So I think it will be a little early to get the exciting stuff, or at least the stuff that gets my blood pressure going up.
Yeah.
But I think that it's going to be a great opportunity to meet each other, get to know each other, and certainly chat about research and what we should be doing in Phelan-McDermid and associated conditions.
I am going to pause and ask you just said multiomics. Can you define that for our families?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry. It rolls off the tongue at this point. So multi-omics is what we look at for protein expression. So basically, any gene that you have in your body encodes certain proteins. And so multi-omics basically means that we can look at all the different types of proteins that you express. Now, it's very much a shotgun approach because we're looking at everything. But in individuals with Phelan-McDermid, what we can find is particular clusters, and those clusters of proteins may or may not predict immune regulation changes. And I think that this is really important because what SHANK3 gene encodes protein-wise does not have anything to do with the immune system. But those proteins may then change downstream proteins, which is actually where we get the immunologic effect. And that's what we're going to be looking for in a multi-omics approach.
Thank you for explaining that to our families. And I know some of our other researchers looking at some of those protein-protein interactions that we've funded. So I'm glad to see this kind of clinically applied now too.
Absolutely.
All right. So we are wrapping up. But before I let you go, anything else you want to share with our PMSF community and our families who are listening?
No, I'm just happy to be part of the community, excited to start on this research. I think it's long overdue, and I'm very hopeful that with this grant and this extra, kickstart, we're going to be able to find something, really compelling and get some answers about, what neuropsychiatric regression is and then what we can do about it, which is, again, the most important thing at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I know we're really excited at the foundation to fund this project. Like you said, it might not answer all of the questions right away, but any little bit of funding is really helpful as we keep reminding our families. And this can lead to some really good, important pilot data for a bigger project. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you again for everyone tuning in. We are excited to kick off more episodes in 2026 for the podcast. So tune in wherever you prefer to listen to your podcast or on YouTube. And then I hope we get to see each other all in July in Aurora, Colorado. Thanks, everyone.